You know, for a game as notoriously difficult as Silksong, the world doesn't feel like it sometimes. Ah, that's more like it. This game tells a story of being taken forcefully into a hostile kingdom of haunted souls and lingering regret. So now Pharloom is taking all of that out and you're its therapist. Everything the land itself can throw at you to make your life harder. Collecting rosaries? Damages you. Shell shards? Damage you. Breaking the environment? Damage. Long fall? Damage. The inhospitable mid-Canadian winds of Mount Fay have enveloped the entire kingdom, so we're always on the clock. And on the other side of the ring is me. I've played this game a few times. I have no idea if this is even going to be remotely possible. I mean, as of writing this script, I do, but I didn't at the time. And by the end of this video, you'll know too, with much less effort. Credits to SibV11, Echo, Julius Skong, and Chrisms for creating the mods used in this video. If the 50% chance I didn't forget wins out, the links will be in the description. This is going to be a long one no matter how you slice it, so let's just get into it, and begin by entering the gates of a very angry Pharloom. As we start, there's a few ground rules that I had the luxury of figuring out through chilling trial and error. The main driving force is Frostloom. The other mods make it more difficult, but right away the freezing cold is shaping how this run goes. The benches are safe retreats, so as soon as we stand up, we need to book it with all intentionality to another bench. But of course that wouldn't be possible on its own. Taking room transitions resets the cold timer to 80%, so you can stave off the cold for a bit longer. But I'm not sure if you noticed, some of these rooms get kinda large. Binding similarly resets our cold timer to 80%, so if we get stuck in the middle of a room like a toddler at a Walmart, that can buy us a bit of time at the cost of some silk. And the final tool we're given to potentially make this possible is needle hits. Hitting an enemy with a basic attack buys us about 1 needle hit worth of time. This will be essential for the countless times the game locks you in a room full of idiots, if they come out frequently enough. Okay, so now the game starts, with a casual walk out of Moss Grotto like there isn't a looming threat of death nipping at Hornet's back. Thankfully, with flawless movement, it's possible to survive loading zone by loading zone up to the game's first bench just below the first boss, Moss Mother. At this point, I don't know what it would take to make this boss difficult. Fight it with a blindfold on, not even because that would be difficult, but at least you wouldn't have to see it. The Chapel Maid, in true Snail Shaman fashion, beats you while you're down. Or maybe she's saving you from freezing to death, I haven't decided yet. Bone Bottom presents Pharloom's last free bench for a while. This is the boundary to Pharloom's wrath, and where the challenge really starts. With rosaries. At least they don't damage us while strung up, but we're surely going to feel our featherweight wallet in this run. Yes, exactly, thank you for the demonstration. Yes, the marrow is also cold. Don't question the logic here, because Deep Docks makes even less sense. The first enemy gauntlet brings up the next new hazard. Any flying enemies that drop rosaries or shell shards become frag grenades on death. The early game isn't too difficult though. There's enough room transitions and damage sponges to get by, up until Mossholm. It's painful enough not picking up any of the rosaries, but in the next room is a tripwire. A trap disguised amongst a bunch of props. This trap covers the entire path, and if you trigger it, it will break the pots, and the game's legal team holds you accountable. You'll always take 1 damage going through here. Mercifully, I could take this shortcut with what health I had left to get the first skill, Silk Spear. Also mercifully, binding a skill resets the cold timer. The Bell Beast fight is pretty easy since she's tanky. Bosses that just soak up hits with high HP shouldn't be too bad, as long as they don't break the terrain or anything. Hunter's March contains not only the most pinpoint snipers in the game, but also the next gauntlet, the one most people don't even participate in because Chakra does most of the work. This is usually a good thing. Here though, it means we don't get as many hits in, and her rings wipe the floor clean of any props the Scarstalker didn't clear out already. But we finally get the ability to sprint, like Hornet just discovered her sense of urgency, and that leads to Lace 1. I'd say this marks the last of the game's easy bosses in the early game. It's the first interaction with Lace and grants you the first Bell Shrine. The next region is Farfields, a region infamously named after how far we are from being able to afford the bench or bellway station. Hopefully that doesn't become a recurring trend. In the furthest reaches, we need the Drifter's Cloak, which is obtained by collecting 25 spine cores, items that drop by attacking them. I must have taken at least 25 damage from breaking the environment trying to get these. It's a good thing the seamstress has a bench in her pillow fort. But with the Drifter's Cloak, we can head onwards to... Oh, yeah. Okay, I know I said Lace 1 was the end of the easy bosses, but no other boss just stands and takes attacks like 4th Chorus, with its own attacks as telegraphed as a 1900s political campaign. The Farfield's climb was actually far more difficult. These updrafts don't do anything but burn precious time. Is it still burning time if we're freezing? After a few attempts, I gave in and collected enough rosaries to unlock the Bellway bench for a closer respawn point, and from there I could reach Greymore. This is not a speed run, as much as speed may be kind of important, so my first goal here was to get the most broken skill in the game. And no, it isn't Rune Rage. I didn't really plan this out. In fact, I didn't have much of a plan at all, so I hadn't accounted for the Craw Arena, a bunch of enemies who will do anything to not be near you. Somehow, this room doesn't seem to have any breakable procs, but don't worry, that was more than made up for by the Craws dropping rosaries everywhere. It might have taken a few attempts, but the squat Craws can be trapped in a corner, and the Craw Bugs provide enough garbage to hit to stave off the cold. This trip was useful to make sure I didn't forget to activate this bell shrine, the only bell that isn't on the route to the Citadel. I'm pretty sure this one is designed to be missed. I'm kind of getting into things now. The next gauntlet was no issue, and somehow I just cleared the Moorwing on my first attempt. At this point, we've reached the center point of Pharloom, the midway point in the entire climb to the Citadel, Bellheart, which is now haunted and frozen over. Shellwood is a maze at the best of times, so of course in a challenge like this, yes, I did get lost. The first room is a huge time sink, going back and forth all over the room. But I think it was for the best, because this is where I picked up on the possibility of cocoon strats. A strategy hardly worth having a name. Basically, in a long room like this, if I die halfway through, then on the next attempt, I can break the cocoon for enough silk for a bind. With that extra 80% boost to the timer, I could get to the next room, which has its own challenge, an elevator. This game loves closing you in elevators that just take so long to reach their destination. I hadn't thought of them until this point, but these could be an issue later. Not this time though, because the elevator is right next to the most disproportionately large button for a door, which unlocked a room transition and a shortcut. With no rosaries, we're just ignoring Chakra the entire game. Luckily, the rest of Shellwood has room transitions pretty quickly accessible from one another. This tall room was a lot more difficult with the damaging rosaries and environment procs, but after a few attempts, we got the Queen Grip. That means it's time for Widow. I can tell how much I hadn't planned this run, because I'd normally be dreading this fight. She's so evasive, the cold is a real threat. And speaking of threats, when she summons bells from the ground, that obliterates any props in the room, so if it wasn't bad enough already, you have at least 1 damage free of charge. I don't know if fate had pity on me, or if I'm just locked in, but I don't know why else I would have, once again, defeated this normally difficult boss in a single attempt. Just as I say that, the game nearly kills me with this unskippable cutscene. It's worth it though, because that's the 4th bell shrine, and the 5th is in Shellwood. With all 5 bells rung, it's just a matter of climbing the blasted steps to reach the Citadel. Just a simple, easy climb through some of the tallest single rooms in the game. This was the biggest routing challenge the game has presented so far. Every room in the blasted steps was a threat and took numerous attempts. I had enough rosaries for the bench at its base, but it's a long way to the next one. I had to unlock all of the shortcuts I could get, usually at the cost of my life. After a dozen attempts, I was able to reach the top of the vertical climb, just to face the toll for both the bench and Bellway, with my net worth of naught. It got so bad I resorted to taking this side path out to the Pinstress in hopes that bench might be a bit more manageable. It wasn't. Even if I got to the top, what follows is another climb leading to one of the game's harder boss fights. So for the first time in the run, I did some backtracking, all the way to Bone Bottom to earn some rosaries from wishes. Of course, I thought it was a great idea to fight the Skull Tyrant, because that boss is easy, when it isn't causing unavoidable damage by breaking the environment every time it steps. Now, with enough rosaries, I was able to climb the blasted steps again, and actually unlock the bench and Bellway. The next climb is one most people who've played this game are very familiar with. This is the nearest bench, so every time the last judge hands you your ass on a plate, you'll take this climb again. It took enough attempts. I learned that diving headfirst into the sand carvers and respawning costs 1 mask, but resets your freeze timer. Call that a hazard respawn. I developed a consistent route, feeding the carvers halfway, finally reached the gate, played the needle in, and I have no silk. So I tried again with more silk. And died. Because the cutscene takes too long. At this point, I was getting concerned this wouldn't be possible. But then something miraculous happened. I spoke to the guy. Apparently, if you talk to the pilgrim first, then playing the needle in becomes part of the cutscene, so it doesn't require silk, and your freeze timer resets. That was very useful to learn on, like, the 5th attempt. Even after resetting the timer, the whole cutscene of the last judge arriving took most of my health. Now, every attempt, she just drops in without the cutscene, which is good because this was not a first attempt. The room is full of little fences and props. And as you may have guessed, her flame attacks do not affect the freeze timer. Logic doesn't apply here. It may have taken more attempts than I'm willing to admit, because I lost count, but I was at least smart enough to save 1 bind worth of silk for after finishing the fight. I survived long enough for the cutscene to start, and we finally reached Act 2. This is where the challenge started to find new and innovative ways of being difficult. It wasted no time at all, with the first room being a headache already. You once again need to navigate back and forth to climb the room, this time with alternating platforms. Normally, you'd just walk forward and take the elevator, but this is a trap that leads to the underworks. I didn't feel like doing that this time, and thankfully, you don't need to. There's an alternate path that leads you to the coral chambers, which is good because I can more quickly reach the top of the Citadel, but bad because it's the coral chambers. If there is one area in this game that makes me want a map even after numerous playthroughs, it's this gold, glistening hellscape of a region. If there's anything good to be said about it, at least the room transitions are close. Most of the time. With minimal issue, we've reached the middle of the Citadel. From here, we're headed to the Underworks. I know, we just avoided it earlier, but this is different. At the far eastern edge of the Citadel is a bell shrine. As soon as you activate it, the area becomes Songclave, but before you do, you can find a key on the ledge. This key grants access to the wonderful region that is White Ward. It's even more wonderful this time because you need to wait an age for the elevator to descend. The region itself is also pretty wide. It just has barely enough transitions to survive, if you don't take stupid damage. White Ward has a hidden path through the bakery ovens, which leads to the Underworks. This way allows us to reach the next silk skill, if we can get there. The Underworks is also home to really annoying enemies, some that take up way too much space, some that explode, and lava. At the center of it all is the Clawline ability, an excellent mobility tool and one we'll need for one of my main goals in this run. But before that, we need to get out. The Clawline is obtained in the corner of this big central room, and the door you enter from locks behind you, so the only way out is through an enemy gauntlet. Gauntlets haven't been too bad so far, but this one presented one of the most difficult enemies it could find. A cutscene. Clawline is required to reach this arena, and uses silk, so I won't have any silk left for a bind once I get there. The first time, I basically had to die to start the fight. Now that it's been started though, when I show up again, it starts more quickly, so I can start damaging enemies and delaying the cold. But that's only if I can damage them. Some of the enemies here enjoy not engaging with you, and some of them explode. Eventually I died from stupid mishandling the last wave of explosive enemies. I once again made the trek to the arena, and it's just open? I guess defeating the last enemies before the game reloaded set the flag for the door being open? I'm not going to complain though, that takes us right to where we entered the Underworks earlier, so we've escaped. I decided now was the best time for a brief pit stop. Back in Moss Grotto is Weave Nest Atla, and in its depths is Ava, a creation of the Weavers that isn't a Weaver, but is related, kind of. You know what, just don't worry about it. When you encounter her for the first time, she upgrades your Hunter's Crest, so damaging enemies fills this bar, and when it's full, needle hits deal 1.3 times damage. Since we need to finish things quickly, I'll take whatever I can get, even if it means dying to death in front of Ava during the cutscene. Now it's time for that big goal I mentioned earlier, way back at the top of Pharloom. At the peak of the mountain, the source of the cold is the Fey Down Cloak, the upgrade that, in the base game, makes you impervious to cold damage. plus giving you a double jump. On the west side of the coral chambers is a path to the slab, and on the other side of the slab is Mount Fay, where the difficult mountain climb begins, requiring clawline. The mountain is normally cold, so this should be like normal. Except that the warm zones that normally reset your cold timer have no effect anymore. So with only the extra 80% from taking room transitions and the tiny boost from damaging enemies, we need to scale the entire mountain. The first bench by Chakra marks the start of the journey. It's easy enough to reach the first room transition back outside. This outside section is the first proper platforming of the mountain, so thankfully the enemies buy us a tiny bit more time, but I still had to hazard respawn in the middle. Reminder that touching water in cold areas for even a frame guarantees at least 1 damage, so in a room full of it, try not to, forget which way to go or anything. I have never been more grateful for the benches Team Cherry spread through the mountain. This one especially, because the next part is definitely the hardest yet. From this bench, the first part is ascending these gondolas, which involves a lot of clawline, so there's no way to spare enough silk for a bind along the way. And hazard respawning is risky here, because the respawn points are pretty sparse. You're more than likely going back quite a ways if you hit a hazard. If you make it to the top, there's a room transition to get 80% of your time back, but this just leads to an even more difficult platforming room over top freezing water. This room is pretty precise already, and now you need to do that under an extremely tight timer, without the help of the warm area on the wall. I genuinely don't know if it would be possible to clear this room normally. I was only able to cross it after leaving a cocoon in the middle so I could get a quick bind. But if you manage to overcome both rooms, then don't forget there's one more short water section, so better hope you don't screw it up and touch the water now. Finally, one last room just to catch you off guard with one of these walking lamps, and you can break this shortcut, never to run that gauntlet again. The next bench is hidden behind a bunch of rubble, so you better have at least 2 masks of health left, lest you kill yourself breaking the environment here. I feel like this is the home stretch though. The rest of the climb gets pretty tight with a timer, but honestly the platforming is pretty natural. For most of it, I was just surviving from clawline to clawline, just barely keeping above the freezing point. The final room has a big wind column that takes forever to ascend. I was just about to die, but the cutscene reset the timer. We made it. So now I can die. Cutscenes seem to be the real villain pulling the strings in this run, but it worked out here. That was just a totally planned cutscene skip. Now with the fade down cloak, we are finally not impervious to cold. No, of course not. That would be too easy. You think we're ever escaping the cold in this run? It just slows the freezing timer, and it only slows it with a 0.75 multiplier. It's only 1/4 slower than before. But that will help, and it also has another feature. Performing the second jump, the one that throws feathers everywhere, restores a tiny amount of the freeze timer. Just enough that spamming it won't refill it. With that adventure out of the way, it's time to get back to the main quest with the Cogwork Dancers. This boss got so much praise when the game came out. It's a great idea, but my god, it's easy. Like Moss Mother, I don't know what challenge would actually make this difficult. It's easy enough I was able to think ahead and save enough silk for a bind after the fight again, but now I can also use double jump to buy more time. That cutscene marks the beginning of the last big quest of the game, the threefold melody. Across the Citadel are 3 melodies that need to be learned. The Architect's melody is at the top of the Cogwork core, following the longest platforming gauntlet of the run. The Vault Keeper's melody is in the depths of the Whispering Vaults, following a gauntlet, some puzzle rooms, and everyone's favorite boss fight. And the Conductor's melody is in the High Halls, at the end of another series of platforming rooms, and on the other side of the largest, hardest enemy gauntlet in the game. Since we're here, we might as well do the Cogwork core first. This is a pretty loathed series of rooms normally. Now do it while freezing to death. At least failing a pogo here resets the cold timer, I guess. This shouldn't be too bad, right? Well, let's get started. The platforming uses a lot more non-enemy techniques, like these rings that just use up time. There's long stretches with no enemies to hit. There are some shortcuts you can take, but they're easy to miss when you're preoccupied thinking about the freeze timer, and heavy clawline usage means binding is rarely possible. At the top, there are 2 corridors plugged with the most obnoxious tin cans the Citadel could produce, and don't forget they drop shell shards, by the way. And finally, at the summit is a huge puzzle. You need to strike these 16 sliding panels to make each pillar drop into the ground. And all of this needs to be done in a single run. Honestly, I'm just thankful for the bench and shortcut in lower cogwork core, and that I've memorized the solution to the puzzle now, or this would just be miserable. But what if I told you this wasn't even the problem with the Architect's Melody? It was a difficult trip, sure, but then I completed the puzzle. This cutscene is agonizingly long, especially for Hornet, and this isn't as kind a cutscene as the one for the Faydown Cloak. When I respawn, I did not receive the melody. So I made the entire trip again. This time I had the cocoon there, so... Okay, fine, forget all the rosaries I just had. I made it up again and replenished my silk on these tin cans. I used a bind the moment before the cutscene began, and this time... I died again. And no melody. I tried again, this time spamming double jump in a corner to hopefully get my timer fully restored. I saw the second set of automatons activate, but no melody. There's no way it goes out like this. Impossible due to a cutscene. There's only so much I can do. One of the only ways left that I could think of to buy more time was more masks. I don't have much choice, so I tried to find enough mask shards to just get one extra mask. It might buy me a single second, but that could be enough. So far, I have 0 mask shards, so I had to find the easiest 4 to get. Easiest in quotes, because Silksong doesn't make any of them easy. In this challenge, even the one available from the shop in Bone Bottom is tedious, since farming rosaries is literally painful. I combined that with one after a gauntlet in Deep Docks, one above the seamstress in Farfields, and one in a hidden path in Shellwood. That must have been nearly half an hour to buy 1 second. While I'm out grabbing groceries, I may as well also pick up a second spool fragment, so I can store a fraction more silk. And finally, I made the climb again. More automatons activated, but still no melody. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that one mask didn't help. I gave it a few more tries, but this was just not going to work. This cutscene is just too long. Even if I got another mask, it wouldn't be enough to survive. Out of desperation, I remembered one niche interaction most people have never heard of or bothered to use. An interaction between the cold and a tool called the Flint Slate. This is a tool in the lower half of Deep Docks, an area full of explosive enemies and breakable props that you normally only enter in Act 3. The Flint Slate is great for players who like using the needle. On use, Hornet runs the needle across it, setting it alight for a short time, causing it to deal extra damage. But if you happen to get it before obtaining the Faydown Cloak, you can use it to slow the freezing timer. In the base game, it pauses freezing for its duration, but of course in this mod it only slows it. But slowing the freeze for that long could be a difference we need. Normally, that part of Deep Docks is really annoying to get to, requiring one of 4 difficult-to-obtain simple keys, then navigating some rooms full of lava and strong enemies. But there's an alternate route into the back of Lower Deep Docks from the deepest part of Farfields. Taking this path, you still navigate some rooms full of lava and strong enemies. This route is maybe a bit shorter, and more importantly doesn't require a key. That didn't do anything to help me getting lost along the way and taking a bunch of damage. Eventually though, after a gauntlet, avoiding Gron's spears, and taking even more damage from other people breaking the environment, I finally got my hands on maybe our salvation. I made the entire climb again, replenished my silk, dodged the shell shards, restored the timer as much as I could, used a bind and the Flint Slate. This was the best attempt I could make. The cold didn't start dealing damage until halfway through the song. And I died. No melody. But it spawned me on top of the button again? I was so confused, but this could be terrible. If this puts me into an infinite loop, this entire save file could be dead. I quickly started playing the needle in again, the cutscene started again, But this run was even worse because I didn't have a chance to use the flint slate. I died before the second layer of automatons even activated. And... what? What? It just decided to give me the melody anyway? That ain't right. Well, let this be a lesson. Don't die at this specific moment in this specific cutscene, or the game has a stroke. And freezes in a way worse than normal. I guess this run is about surviving the freezing cold, but this is ridiculous. It played the saving animation though, so I wasn't concerned. It should just be a quick reset. The save file shows our location is in the Cogwork core, so we should be good, and... okay, the game really didn't like what we just did to it. Honestly, the failsafes the game has to at least function in even the most extreme circumstances is impressive. I assume the last respawn point was set to the cutscene, and once the cutscene finished, that respawn point no longer existed, so it used the start of the game as a fallback. Before moving on, I wanted to fully free myself from all of this by getting my cocoon back. I died at the top of Cogwork Core, so it should be there. I made one actually final trip up the platforming room to find... nothing? Well, I can't say I'm surprised. It must have bugged and not spawned a cocoon. That was a waste of time. I descended back down to the bench, and just out of curiosity, I checked this room above the bench that I hadn't been to yet in this save file. And why is it there? This room is just for a map, and is completely disconnected from the room where I died. Why is it... actually, I'm not going to question it. I got my cocoon, that ordeal is over. That was certainly something, but we have the Architect's melody, finally, and the other two don't have nearly as long cutscene associated with them. Vault Keeper's melody next. After all we went through for the first melody, this gauntlet is nothing. We have plenty of time as long as we just keep hitting enemies. The big challenge for this melody is the Performance PhD, and I'll be honest, I've kind of been nailing the combat in this playthrough. I don't know why. Every time he gets staggered, we can beat the hell out of him enough that our freeze timer must be fully replenished. And again, we ended with a mind's worth of Silk. Which is actually a good thing, because without it, his drawn-out, dying breath could have actually been the biggest threat. Anyway, that's the Psalm Cylinder. All we need to do is take it to the guy in the vault to play it for us, and... just ignore that. Only one melody remains, the Conductor's melody in High Halls. With double jump and claw line, the enemies are pretty easy to ignore. The biggest challenge is waiting on these levers. The High Halls are a big loop, so at the end of the final platforming room, the shortcut is opened and a bench is available for free right next to the final enemy gauntlet. This is often considered the hardest challenge outside of Act 3, now with the looming threat of frozen demise. So before the fight, I absolutely cut the Claw Maiden core so I wouldn't have to worry about them eating away at my Silk and keeping their distance. But they're just the garnish on this 11-course banquet of 25 Citadel's most fervently devout. And I can't be an Architect main and rely on tools because I need the needle hits to not freeze. Maestros and Choristers were actually a relief since they didn't keep themselves in a different time zone, and staying on the walls was a strat. At least until the Choir Clappers arrived. They can stall an irritating amount of time with their AoE attacks, but they also eat up a lot of hits, which is good to get Silk. For one of the game's hardest challenges, with multiple mods that seemed purpose-built to make this room hell, after the trouble I had in speedruns, why do I get this first try now? I shouldn't complain though. That's the final arena for the threefold melody. Conductor Ballador is even kind enough to reset the freeze timer when talking. Peeling back the curtain a bit here, I took a break at this point, knowing that all that remained was the final two boss fights, which shouldn't be too much harder than normal. Oh, how wrong I was. I had forgotten one crucial obstacle employed by the Citadel's most devious, devilish minds. This enormous, freezing cutscene. You play all three pieces of the melody in order, after which each statue joins for its part, leading to a final interaction, and then they recede into the floor. Then the elevator opens. This is by far the longest cutscene of the run. I was not mentally prepared for a roadblock of this scale, right at the end. Surely this cutscene won't be what kills the run. I've already added one mask, and even another few masks would make minimal difference. I have the flint slate, but it fades before I can even start the song. I tried again with the most optimal movements, binding right before starting the cutscene, playing the needle in on the first possible frame, but it's not even close. I tried for I don't even know how long, hoping for any sign of progress, any indication that this might be remotely possible, but there's not much I can do during the cutscene. With what exists in the base game, there isn't anything left. There's just no way to survive that long in the base game. But there might be one final option, the last gimmicky trick that might work. As stupid as it is, the magnetite dice. Okay, I kind of lied. These aren't new, they are in the base game. At this point, they can just be picked up next to Lumble's corpse. Thank you, Lumble. The dice are unquestionably the best yellow tool in the game. When they're equipped, on very rare occasion upon being hit, they just tell the enemy to shove it, and you take no damage. The issue is that normally the dice have no effect on environmental damage, including freezing damage. But the last change this mod makes is changing that very restriction. On its own, this still wouldn't help, because it's literally not possible to have a trigger enough to finish the cutscene. But when it triggers, it also fully resets the freeze timer. This sounds like it should work. But here's the catch. I did say on very rare occasion. It literally starts at 0%. Every time you take damage without it triggering, the chance increases first to 2%, then 4%, 6%, 8%, and maxing out at 10% if you've taken 5 or more hits. Once it triggers, the chance resets back to 0, so the odds aren't exactly in our favor. If I just go fresh off the bench, the odds of it triggering before I die is 30%. So I had the idea to take 5 damage from this enemy before each attempt, so I had the highest odds going in. It didn't take many tries before it activated. It was even on my last mask too, so it bought me the maximum amount of time a single activation can. And of course, I died. Again. And the elevator is still closed. What else can I do? Activate it twice? Yes, I can do that, approximately 3% of the time. If I max out my odds going in, best case scenario it activates on the first damage, which is a 10% chance. Then I'd have a 30% chance of it activating again before death. So a 3% chance. But on this channel, I've had worse. It was only a matter of time. Eventually, it activated on my second tick of damage, and again on my last remaining mask. The melody finished. I stood, waiting painfully while the elevator just rattled for an excruciating length of time, but I had saved my bind and was able to use it just in time. I just sat on the bench for a while. I'd never anticipated this obstacle. The hardest challenge of the run, the 3-fold melody cutscene. It's finished. Now, all that remains is to defeat the final bosses, starting with Lace 2. Yeah, that went about how I expected. I was still in shock from having beaten the odds. It took me a few attempts to refocus, but as long as I kept getting hits in and binding when possible, that kept the cold at bay. At this point, I've gotten pretty used to preserving enough silk for a bind after landing the final blow, and double jumping to buy time for all the animations to play. The Terminus bench is opened. At the top of the cradle, the final fight can finally start. And it's Grandmother Silk. She's the spongiest of all bosses. She has one attack that deals 3 masks of damage, and she can fill the screen with projectiles, but she just lets you get so many free hits in, you always have a bind to spare. In her final phase, she starts pulling debris from the ceiling, but I guess that doesn't count. I guess Mentorbug didn't make the cradle. It didn't take long, the final first try victory of the run, and we're treated to the final cutscene, overlaid with the unending sound of crackling ice. I couldn't think of a more fitting send-off. Pharloom is now blanketed under silk and bitter cold. We've discovered Silksong's worst ending. As the credits conclude, that was apparently 7 hours, 19 minutes, and 40 seconds to complete Silksong with the most aggressively hostile Pharloom. Fall damage, rosary damage, shell shard damage, prop damage, and freezing cold of Mount Fae, and at launch people said this game was impossible. For how difficult it was, and how tedious it got sometimes, I'm actually really pleased with how well this combination of mods worked out. Pharloom, of course, took the main stage with shaping how the run was played, but the poisoned rosaries played really well into it, making benches hard to afford. Even Menderbug's haunting and fall damage created a difficult combination of needing to be careful where and how you move while on a strict timer. It became a huge puzzle. Shout out again to the creators of these mods. Seriously, if you have any interest, I highly encourage you to check out the modding scene for this game. This was just a small selection of the many that already exist, and of course there are some big mods on the horizon. So if you want to see more Silksong, or just more challenges like this, then click those buttons below. There's a reason people ask, it's essential for channels like these. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.